In today's video, we're going to be taking a look here at the current conditions where there is a lot going on across the screen, as you can see. And we're also going to be taking a look at the upcoming pattern where we have multiple storms still on their way. They're going to be moving from the Pacific across the entire nation, basically impacting everybody. So we're going to be talking about all of these things, also some temperature changes down the road that we've been talking about as well that we need to go over once more. Now, as we work our way through the northwest here, we can see that there is some rainfall happening here along the coast of Washington and very far northern Oregon there. And there is a little bit of snowfall there in the Olympic Mountains, also the northern Cascades, but primarily rainfall is happening at this point. As we work our way a little bit further eastward, we can see there is some snow showers happening from Montana through into portions of Wyoming, South Dakota, and North Dakota there. So we're seeing some of that happening. Then as we work our way towards the southwest, we can see even more activity as there is a low pressure system nearby Los Angeles there. So we're seeing that take place. We're also seeing some activity, I'd say the heaviest of the activity here near the San Francisco Bay inland basically towards the Sierra Nevadas there. So we'll take a look at that in a second. And then there's a lot of activity happening here for Arizona, New Mexico, and in general the Four Corner states. But heavier rainfall there for southern Arizona, kind of a more rare occurrence there. And then snowfall in your more high elevation areas. Now as we take a look here at the Sierra Nevadas, we can see very heavy precipitation just to the west of those Sierra Nevada mountains, and that is going to be heading right over those mountain ranges, bringing even heavier snowfall. Our whites here are extremely heavy rates of snowfall coming down, and then the blues are even heavier. Probably whiteout conditions is usually what that means. Now, as we work our way further eastward, we can see a much more major low here taking place, and this is swirling and twirling in this direction, bringing precipitation in a kind of counterclockwise motion there. So we're seeing that take place, making sure there's no precipitation that I'm missing here. We do see snowfall here for the Dakotas and Minnesota, as well as far south as Nebraska at this point. A little bit further eastward, we can see these bands of heavier rainfall here in these areas. This is going to be showery activity, both moderate to heavy showers taking place across Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, all of these areas taking place at this point. As we work our way just a little bit further southward, we can see some showers on the very southern end. And really what we're going to see as an extension of this for a lot of the southeast later on tomorrow, for the most part, is showery activity, lighter showers to maybe moderate showers across the southeast region is what I expect to happen from that. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We do see that there is still heavy snowfall taking place for southern New England from that system offshore way down here. We can see that this is throwing bands onshore to Canada and Maine here, and this is bringing freezing rain and sleet here on the very eastern end of Maine. And then as you work your way further west in Maine, we're seeing more snowfall, heavier in some spots as well there, but definitely some mixing happening, some icy mess basically happening there in Maine. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is move on. We're going to take a look at that model of guidance in just a second. Now, I think the primary focus here in the upcoming pattern should be that there is still multiple options out there for what's going to be happening. Now, we will see that 2 out of 3 of these models do show a very similar solution, so that could be the more likely outcome, I guess we could say. We're going to just move this on towards this afternoon. We see that this low is kind of diving here, and these lows and storms in general for the West Coast are going to be starting to slow down here in the upcoming pattern. And we're going to get a lot more of a northern jet, southern jet pattern. For instance, we have more of a merged jet that's just been sending these storms kind of in this, I keep doing it too far or too short. There we go. Something like this, where the trough is here. So the northern jet and the southern jet are doing this together. Now, what we're likely going to see moving forward is something like this in that northern jet, and then more of a southern jet coming together here on the eastern end of things, and then coming together. And what we will be seeing is snowstorms likely in this corridor here is kind of where I'm watching the most. The interior northeastern United States, the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. So, as we work our way through this, We get these showers here in the southeast that I was talking about. I've been saying this for days. I think this is more of a shower event, not really a big deal at all. Once we get into this next system, though, a lot more major here. This is Wednesday the 18th. We have our cold front here, warm front somewhere in here, and severe weather likely for this kind of zigzag area I'm drawing in there. So we're going to be watching closely in that corridor for that. We can also see snowfall taking over here for a lot of our plains into the upper Midwest with this low pressure system. We can see this cold front's looking a lot more intense by the time we're reaching approximately Thursday morning, very early Thursday morning here. Now, as we can just continue this on, we see this cold front kind of reaches the eastern United States. Things are a lot more isolated and scattered by this point. This is Thursday into Friday here. We're just going to keep going. And we see this first storm where we see this northern jet here kind of actually diving southward through the western states, doing something like this. But we see that the southern jet, I think because of this ridging in here, back here, this is what kind of separates that southern jet where it's going to come in like this more like and meet up with that northern jet over the eastern United States. And we can see a lot of Gulf energy kind of rising up and wanting to join up with it here as well. You can kind of see the motion here, and then we see things really just pop up out of nowhere here, right over the Gulf states in the deeper south. And this is just going to move up pretty far southward. If there was more cold air available, like let's say we were in more of this type of pattern, which I know we have not seen a lot of this, or even if we were in more like this, where jet stream is moving through like this, I think this is a phenomenal pattern as far as the storminess for southern sliders. So where you see these deep south states seeing snowfall. And here, this is a phenomenal storm track that we're going to see ourselves in for about a week or so, where we get a lot of storms like this. This is so favorable for these types of snowstorms, but the cold air is just not favorable for that whatsoever. So it is a bit unfortunate, but this is classic storm track right here, where it tracks just south of the region, just like this. You would typically expect in January to see a snowstorm in this corridor here with that type of a pattern, but obviously, like I said, the cold air is just not there. Now, we do get a little bit on the northern end, but this looks like a little bit of a mixed mess here, in my opinion. Now, as we keep going, we get another storm popping up out of nowhere. Now, there was a piece of energy that came in with the northern jet, but we can also tell there's a lot coming in from that southern jet as well, which beforehand we were seeing almost all of this energy moving in from that northern jet. So this is a merged jet system here. You see snowfall on the northern end, rainfall and even potentially severe weather on the southern end. And we're seeing just this swath of snowfall here on the northern end of this storm. Lots and lots of thunderstorms and rainfall on the southern end there. And we're seeing more and more of these types of storms. As the jet stream continues to feature a bit of a southeast ridge here, that's why these areas here are thriving, and these areas underneath are absolutely not, just dealing with some rainfall. Now, as we take a look at that total rainfall, no surprise that we're seeing things slow down out west because of the factors that I mentioned, and we're seeing things really pick up here for the Gulf states and the southeast states, as a lot of this energy is going to be moving across the region just like this. So we're going to see tons of rainfall underneath. Now, if you're anywhere in the whites, it's practically no precipitation. Your grays are 1/10 of an inch or less. Your greens are 1/10 of an inch to 1/2 inch. Blues 1/2 inch to an inch. Your yellows 1 inch to 2 inches. Reds 2 to 5 inches there, and then your browns 5 to 10. Total snowfall over the course of the next 10 days would look something like this. And albeit we get some snowfall in this corridor here, as you can see, which is something that you can't really say for most of this winter thus far. But it is still quite minimal and still being taken with a grain of salt. Now, anywhere in the grays is a dusting, if anything. Blues 2 to 6 inches of snowfall. Purple 6 to 10. Pinks 10 to 20. Your pastel blues will be 20 to 35 there, and then your pastel pinks will be 35 inches or more. Now, for the GFS model, because we're just going to move on through these models, we could see that this one is very similar here to the European model. After the 20th, where we get more cold in the east, we start to get these kind of Gulf systems moving in, meeting up with that northern jet, which is a little bit more flat on this GFS model as opposed to the European model. We still do get this bit of a snowstorm here, back end activity here across a lot of the mid-Atlantic and northeast. So we're going to be tracking this over the coming days. Certainly something to track moving forward. And then we get another system very similar here moving up around the 25th. and this one does eventually bring snowfall as well to the Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, and Northeast in here. So this is that corridor we're watching, as the Southeast Ridge is still playing a big part in this active pattern we're in. Now, as you can see, for a time here, we get a ridge in the central United States, and this brings a pretty deep trough in the east, but we don't line up any snowfall with that at all. And then we get back, by the end of this model, February 1st, into a pattern that looks a lot like this, where the Southeast Ridge is completely dominant over the entire pattern here, as you can see. And we have this northern jet taking over, and it does look like there is more storms moving in off the Pacific here, as you can see. So we could return to a pattern like we've seen for the first half of January, but that is a big question mark at this point. Now, the Canadian model is kind of the contrarian here. We see that this model does feature these Gulf storms meeting up with the northern jet, so we see this on all three major models. So this piece of energy is dived south from that point, and we're seeing some of that energy come from the Gulf. But the European and the GFS model had it tracking just about like that from this point. In the red, I'll show the Canadian model, but we see it kind of far off, hundreds of miles off, which has kind of been the trend with this model over the last couple of model runs. So we're going to see if this is the correct model, which would be extremely impressive if that red track is correct and this model's totally right and the GFS and the European are wrong. But I think this yellow track is going to be correct, and we're going to see that the GFS and the European model were in fact correct. But this is something I wanted to show because it does kind of contradict the GFS and the European model. So there is still models out here that are showing much more dominant southeast ridge that's completely blocking the storm from even tracking anywhere near the northeastern United States, and instead has this storm really just head northward over the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley instead of over the east. So that is quite different, and we're going to track both of these scenarios moving forward, but likely that European model is correct, and that's almost normally the case, I would say, at this point. The Canadian model is typically slightly better than the GFS model, though, as of this year. So we have a lot to track and a lot to think about. So be sure to subscribe. We do upload every single day, and I'm going to be showing all three of these models and kind of just tracking this as broadly as we can moving forward over the coming days. So stay tuned with us over the course of all that. You can even hit the bell icon and click all videos so you get notified when we ever do upload, which again is every single day. Also, like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below. I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.